I'm Dana. I worship here at Faith. So what happened to me was last year during circuit breaker, I started noticing that I didn't feel very well. A lot of people mentioned that I look very skinny, so it looked as if I lost a lot of weight.
Hi, my name is Imelda. Since I was young, I've always had gastric pains. So, pain from when I eat at the wrong time, pain from eating the wrong food, or even wearing the wrong clothes, like if the clothes were too tight around the waist.
I started having what seemed like a recurring stomach flu, kept vomiting, kept going to the toilet, I couldn't ingest my food sometimes. And then other times I'll be very, very hungry and I'll just eat non-stop. My GP couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. So I had a referral to the polyclinic to have some blood tests done. And what turned out was that my blood glucose was very, very high and my sodium levels in the blood were very low.
When I was in my 20s, I actually had to undergo an emergency operation for perforated stomach ulcer. So I thought that the episode then was closed at that time and then my stomach was healed. So fast forward to some 20 years later, I started experiencing gastric pains with increasing frequency and intensity. So I decided to see the specialist again. So upon seeing the specialist, what the specialist realized was that my pylorus, which is actually the part connecting the stomach to the intestines, was actually swollen and it was infected.
My parents drove me to the nearest A&E, and it was there that I'm diagnosed with diabetes. The story is that my blood, the acid level of my blood was very dangerously high. All the glucose was staying in the bloodstream and it wasn't being absorbed because my pancreas does not produce enough insulin to absorb glucose. So with that, my body started burning itself as fuel. And if I had gone to the hospital any later, the outcome might have been very different according to the doctor.
So when I went to the hospital, I was warded, and then the doctors later diagnosed and said that I needed to go for a gastrectomy.
Everything seemed like a blur because all I wanted to do was get out of hospital. But upon going home, I faced a lot of anxiety about the food I could eat.
So I was actually filled with quite conflicting emotions that went through my mind. The first one was actually relief because the doctors finally can tell me what's wrong with me and that, they have a solution for that.
I take insulin injections, so the amount of medication that I take depends on what I eat and how much I eat. So I had to go through a very steep learning process of how to adjust it according to monitoring my own blood sugar numbers and learning how to count carbohydrates in my food. So half the time I was very anxious. There were times where I sit down in front of my food and just burst into tears because I don't know what to do. If I take too much medication at mealtime, my blood glucose is going to drop very, very low. And if I don't treat it, then I could end up in a coma or unconscious.
The other concern that I had, of course, then was, oh man, all the pain, the huge dread, of having to go through the pain, the recovery process, being away from work, being away from church, being away from all the activities, my normal life. I'm so much older now than compared to, say, 20 years ago. The recovery process, I expect it to be even slower, right? And in my previous operation, I actually had to go back to the hospital like 3 times, stayed back in the hospital 3 times. So I didn't want to have to go through that process. So I even prayed and asked God, can you take away this cup? Please, can you just heal me somehow miraculously with just a touch of your hand, without having me to go through this process?
I did. In fact, I was very upset with God for a very long time. So I spent many, many nights praying and wrestling with God and asking Him, why did you allow this? Because I didn't believe that this wasn't from God. In a sense, I knew deep down that it is something that God has allowed.
So when the pain came and couldn't go away despite taking medication and all that, I was feeling very scared and alone. Because I still had to go about my daily life, and I had to put a brave front, right, in the day. When you go to work, you just look like nothing's wrong. But at night, I was actually crying out to God and say, God, please deliver me from this pain. You know, why is this pain not going to go away?
I remember teaching in a Sanjam lesson quite some time ago. It's about the story of Joseph. And in the Old Testament, Joseph actually says that to the brothers, you intended to harm me, but God turned it out for my good. And I guess the perspective that changed was that sometimes I feel that if God intends to bless me, then maybe only good things should happen to me.
My total hospital bill came out to $100,000. So when I saw the bill, I was worried about how I was going to pay for it. My company insurance only covered up to a cap of $20,000. So I even tried to see if I could max out my Medisave. But unfortunately, I was told the government has put a cap on the percentage in which you can use for each hospital stay. Many thoughts were running through my mind. Thoughts of even maybe death would be a blessed relief. You know, you die already, no more pain, no need to work, no need to worry whether whatever I eat is it going to cause pain or to go through the process.
It challenged my notion of what God's blessing means. Because I think for us, very conventionally, we would think that, oh, if God blesses us, He gives us good things. And that was very challenging to me because I couldn't see my illness as a blessing. But that's not the right perspective to take. And I think the whole situation with me falling sick last year showed me that God takes something that we perceive as bad or we perceive as negative, and He uses it as that moment of our weakness where He shows how strong He is.
Psalms 46:10, "Be still and know that I'm God." This was the verse that was actually instilled upon my heart during this period of time. I'm a doer and I need to be in the heart of things. I always need to be in constant action. I also at the beginning of the year, I just started a new role in my job. So I was just getting into the thick of things and getting things moving, and then this happened, right? So when God reminded me of this verse, it was just to be still and know that He is in control of it all.
My family and my loved ones, they were there for me 24/7. Their physical presence alone reminded me that I wasn't alone in this.
My cell group members, the worship team, my friends and my colleagues, who during this period of time, they were constantly checking in on me. My phones were constantly buzzing with prayers, verses of encouragement, words of encouragement, to simply check in on me to see how I was doing. And this actually helped me get by each and every day. I even had cell group members that helped to fetch me to the hospital after worship because I had to rush to A&E. And then also had people who helped to fetch me back upon my discharge. So I had friends that actually came by to my house to pick me up, to just go for a drive, because I was recuperating and I wasn't that mobile at that point in time. But they just wanted me to be able to have a chance to just get out and have a fresh air. So I was very thankful for all that.
My cell group has a very good prayer life. So my cell group leader actually leads the whole cell in WhatsApp prayer once a week. And I remember I was in the hospital, I was in the A&E room, and in my distress, I just messaged my cell group to tell them I'm in hospital. And from that point, they never stopped praying for me. But at the same time, because of the mental, emotional, and spiritual struggle that I was facing, somehow I remember being in hospital and I played this song on loop every time I couldn't sleep. It's a song by the group called Casting Crowns. The song's title is The God of All My Days. So to me, it was a reminder that God is not just the God of my good days or the God of the days when I'm faithful to Him. In my fear, in my anxiety, He was still God. And I think that every time I prayed that line aloud, or I sang that line aloud in my mind, it was an exercise in me trusting that God is still sovereign and God is still the God of my days.
One of the key songs that actually helped me through this period of time was The Goodness of God. Because it was indeed, even during this time, it was time to proclaim that all my life He has been faithful, all my life He has been so good.
Later on, this is much later, I think sometime late last year, Pastor John preached a sermon on Ecclesiastes chapter 3, which says that God makes everything beautiful in His time. And he explained that the word beautiful means appropriate. And when I watched that sermon on live stream at home, the tears just fell because it was as if God was speaking directly to me, saying that I have allowed this to happen to you because it's appropriate for you and it's a suitable thing to happen to you, even though you may not know why, you may not understand fully why this is happening. But I felt very assured that even in the daily worry, anxiety, fear, concern, like obsession with what my blood glucose is doing at any given point in the day, God knows what He's doing.
I remember lying in bed after surgery, and the second, I was just watching the clock, the second hand of the clock tick by. It was as if, the world just stood still for me, but then the rest of the world was just moving around, moving on with life. So it was quite scary and alone. I know that there were friends, I had families that were praying for me, but at the same time, I knew this was something that I had to face alone and with God's help, and that only He knew exactly what I was going through.
What has changed in my relationship with God is that I'm able to trust God more with my physical body. In the sense that I know that He's sovereign. And I think sometimes it's very hard for me to trust God and to fully surrender everything to Him. But with diabetes, there are so many things that I can't control on my own. And the fact that there is a sovereign God who controls every fiber of my being reminds me that He is in control. He's the one who created this body, so He has control over it. And I think with that, I feel a lot more sure in my walk with God that He is watching over every little detail of my life.
So when my hospital, the insurance claim came back, I looked at I opened the attachment, and I was actually very surprised by what I saw, because the insurance had actually covered more than 99% of my hospital bill. There was a verse, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and petition, present your request to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and mind in Christ Jesus. Taken from Philippians 4:6 and 7. And that was the verse also that got me through and whenever I'm faced with a certain circumstances that I felt I could not overcome, that God will be there for us. And we just have to pray. He may not answer it in a way that we want Him to answer it, but somehow He will make it even better and beyond what we can imagine.
I guess sometimes I tend to want to find God only in the big things, but when it comes to the minute details of our life, sometimes I forget that He's there. But now I see Him in even the fact that, I can dose my medication correctly when I eat pizza, or I didn't have a low blood sugar episode when I did some exercise. I think it's very easy to perceive that you are alone, because it will feel as if you are the only one who faces these challenges. But I think something that brought a lot of comfort to me is the fact that the kind of suffering we face is very often nothing compared to the suffering that Jesus faced for us. And because Jesus was human and God at the same time, He understands that pain and that suffering and that loneliness even more than we can imagine. So while it is an ongoing struggle, it's an ongoing battle, God is present in the small things as much as He is present in the big things.
Thank you for watching. Through these stories of faith, we hope to foster a culture of vulnerability and openness within our church community. If you would like to share how God has worked through your life, or if you think that your past struggles may encourage someone in this present moment, kindly drop us an email. If you are new to this church, come and visit us on our live stream on Sunday mornings, or you can visit our website at faithmc.sg. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so that you can keep up with our stories of faith.